Ned spent the afternoon gathering more information about Jon Arryn. He visited with Ser Hugh of the Vale briefly, trying to glean scraps of what Jon's last days were like. That yielded little but arrogance. He planned to speak with the royal armorer Tobo Mott, but learned that the man was away on errands. Each conversation reminded Ned that time was short, and the city's secrets ran deep. Tywin's presence would make unraveling certain truths more difficult. People might fear the Hand, but they feared Tywin more. Would they speak freely, or would they keep silent for fear of Lannister reprisals? That evening, Ned received a summons from Cersei Lannister herself, requesting a private audience. It surprised him, though not as much as it might have before he'd arrived. Tywin in the city changed the balance of power. Perhaps she sought to reassure Ned or glean his intentions. Reluctantly, Ned agreed to meet her in one of the smaller gardens of the Red Keep, near twilight. The garden was filled with night-blooming flowers, the air thick with their perfume. Torches in iron sconces flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Cersei awaited him, dressed in a gown of emerald and gold that matched her eyes. When Ned arrived, she offered a gracious smile that did not reach those eyes. He bowed stiffly. "You requested my presence, Your Grace," he said, keeping his tone neutral. She gestured for him to walk with her along a gravel path flanked by tall hedges. "Yes, Lord Stark. I wish to speak with you about certain concerns. My father's presence complicates matters, but it may also present an opportunity for us all." Ned stiffened. "I cannot claim to understand your father's intentions. Perhaps you might enlighten me." She stopped near a stone bench, resting her hand lightly on the back of it. "Lord Tywin is here to ensure House Lannister remains essential to the crown. He does not trust my husband to manage finances or alliances properly. And I suspect, Lord Stark, that my father does not fully trust me either." She gave a bitter laugh. "But you and I have a shared interest in the king's well-being, do we not? Neither of us wants Robert undone by ill counsel or by the realm's discontent." Ned remembered the rumors. He thought of how, in another life, Cersei might have tried to rid herself of Robert more directly. But with Tywin's watchful eye, she could not act rashly. "Yes, we both have an interest in keeping Robert well," he said, though his voice held a note of caution. "Then let us ensure that the crown's finances are handled prudently," Cersei said. "Convince Robert to keep the tourney modest, if that is your wish. I'll speak to him as well. Perhaps together we can spare the realm further indebtedness. My father will find other ways to maintain his influence, I'm sure." Ned wondered if this was a genuine olive branch or a ploy to gauge how far he would go. "I appreciate your willingness to speak with the king on this matter. I only hope he will listen." She turned, looking at him with an intensity that made him uneasy. "You are an honorable man, Lord Stark. Sometimes I wonder if that might be your greatest weakness. The game at court is a treacherous one." "It is not a game to me," Ned said flatly. "It is my duty to protect the king and the realm." Her lips curved in a faint, mocking smile. "Duty, of course." She let the silence stretch between them for a moment, the hiss of torch flames the only sound. "Tell me, how do you find my father's presence in King's Landing?" It was a pointed question. Ned chose a careful answer. "Lord Tywin is a formidable figure. The realm knows his accomplishments. If his intentions are honorable, I can only welcome his help." "And if they are not?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Then the king has entrusted me to keep watch," Ned replied. She laughed softly, though there was no warmth in it. "You are honest to a fault, Lord Stark. Take care that it does not kill you." With that, she inclined her head, leaving Ned with 1,000 unanswered questions swirling in his mind. In the days that followed, Ned found the capital abuzz with news. Tywin Lannister had been seen holding private discussions with various lords. The rumor mill churned. Was Tywin forging new alliances on behalf of the king, or on behalf of House Lannister? Ser Jaime was more often seen among the Kingsguard, looking bored. Tyrion Lannister, on the other hand, was said to be journeying to the city from some errand in the mountains, though none knew precisely when he would arrive. For Ned, Each day brought new challenges. He continued investigating Jon Arryn's death, increasingly convinced it was no simple illness. But with Tywin in the Red Keep, any attempt to question Lannister loyalty became fraught. He spoke discreetly to Varys, who teased out half-hints about potions and hush money, but nothing concrete. When Ned pressed him, Varys would only murmur about the things we do for love, which made Ned's blood run cold. He recalled the rumor that the Queen's children might not be Robert's at all. Yet how to prove such a thing, especially with Tywin here? The slightest misstep could cost Ned his head, or plunge the realm into war. Robert, for his part, seemed content to let Ned and Tywin shoulder the realm's burdens. He spent his days hunting, feasting, or reminiscing about the glory of his rebellion. He had a new mistress, so the whispers went, and Ned worried that the Queen's patience would be tested. Had Tywin not arrived, would Cersei have risked poisoning Robert? Quite possibly, but with Tywin's stern presence, her father's unstoppable rage looming over any betrayal, it seemed she dared not. A father's disapproval might not stop her if she were desperate, but Tywin's disapproval was more than that. It was a threat. She would not merely risk shame. She would risk incurring Tywin's uncompromising wrath, which extended well beyond a father's scolding. Weeks passed. The tourney preparations went forward, albeit on a slightly reduced scale after both Cersei and Ned appealed to Robert. The king grumbled at the cost-cutting measures, but eventually conceded. Merchants and common folk began streaming into the city, hoping for a glimpse of the knights who would compete. Sansa was thrilled at the prospect of watching the justs. Arya insisted she wanted to watch, too, but only so she could see men fighting. Ned agreed to let both of them attend, providing they were kept safe. Meanwhile, Ned's search for answers about Jon Arryn led him to an orphan boy with black hair, then another. All shared certain distinctive features that reminded him of Robert. Bastards, fathered by the king. Jon Arryn had been investigating them, charting their existence. Ned began to piece it together. Robert's true-born children bore no trace of his coloring, but these bastards did. That suggested Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen might not be Robert's at all. The father, Jaime Lannister, perhaps? Ned recoiled at the thought of Lannister incest. It was monstrous, but the hair color clue was damning. One evening, Ned pored over the book Jon Arryn had studied, the lineages and histories of the great houses of the Seven Kingdoms. He found the truth spelled out in genealogies. Baratheon blood had always yielded black hair, even when crossed with lighter or golden hair. If Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen were Roberts, they should have some mark of his coloring, yet all three were golden-haired. Jaime's hair, however, was gold. It was the only explanation that made sense. He sat back, breathing heavily. This discovery could shatter the realm. Robert's heirs might be Lannister bastards, a product of incest. In another world, Cersei would have done anything to keep this secret, up to killing Robert before he discovered the truth, or even killing Ned if he became too close to uncovering it. But now, with Tywin in King's Landing, the stakes were even higher. If Tywin learned of this truth, would he support his daughter's deception or see her punished? Ned guessed Tywin would do anything to keep the Lannister name unblemished. That might mean ensuring Joffrey was still considered the heir, or possibly removing all involved to safeguard the family's future. Tywin Lannister would not abide scandal without forging a plan to come out on top. What could Ned do? He weighed telling Robert, but the king was unpredictable, especially in matters involving the Lannisters. Another approach might be to confront Cersei directly, or even Tywin. Neither option appealed to him. If Tywin knew, he might orchestrate a swift and devastating plan to contain the crisis. Ned's mind spiraled with the possibilities. War with the Lannisters? Civil strife that would tear the realm apart? He decided he must speak to Cersei alone, as he had once before, but this time with the truth in hand. If he could convince her to leave the city with her children, let Robert name a new heir, then perhaps the realm could avoid bloodshed. It was a naive hope, but Ned was an honorable man. He believed in giving her the chance to do what was right for once. He arranged to meet her again in the Godswood, a place of relative privacy. He sent a discreet message through one of his men, who passed it to her handmaiden. The next night, under the silver glow of the moon, Ned waited among the weirwood's pale branches, heart pounding in his chest. At length, Cersei arrived, cloak drawn tight around her. She eyed him warily. "Lord Stark, I trust this is not a social visit," she said in a low voice. "It is not," Ned said. He took a breath. "I know the truth about your children. They are not Robert's. They are Jaime's." She went very still, her face unreadable, but her eyes flickered with a dangerous light. "What do you intend to do with this knowledge?" Ned recalled how he had confronted her in another time, in another life. Then, she had threatened him, and later, Robert died on a hunting trip. But that was before Tywin's watchful presence. "I would have you take your children and leave. Go to Casterly Rock or across the sea if you must. If Robert learns of this, if your father learns of this, there will be war. The realm does not need that." Cersei's laugh was soft but bitter. "So you would spare us? How chivalrous. But you underestimate my father if you think your revelations would crush us so easily. He would never let me run away in disgrace. If he believed the scandal too great, he would find a means to preserve House Lannister's claim. You are not the only one who can sense a war brewing." Ned felt a sinking sensation. "Then do you deny it?" he asked, knowing full well she would not. She met his gaze squarely. "No, I do not. But if you think you can simply push a Lannister into hiding, you are naive. My father would turn the world upside down first. Do you imagine I want that? War would destroy us all, but it would destroy my enemies first. Do not force my hand, Ned Stark." He stared at her, realizing the checkmate. Tywin had the gold, the power, and the cunning. If Ned exposed the secret, Tywin might back Joffrey's claim with force, plunging the realm into chaos. Robert would rage or perhaps be undone by the betrayal. And if Ned remained silent, then the lie persisted. "Robert has a right to know," Ned said quietly, though his tone was less certain than before. "The line of succession. You think Robert will remain safe if he learns his heirs are false?" Cersei said, her voice laced with scorn. "My father would never allow that knowledge to remain in Robert's hands. Nor would Jaime. You know what lengths they can go to. You were at the Trident, you saw the results of my father's cunning at the end of the rebellion, didn't you? Do you think he will hesitate now?" Ned pictured the sack of King's Landing, the way Tywin had turned cloak in Robert's rebellion at the final moment, offering his loyalty by breaking open the gates and letting his soldiers ravage the city. "I have seen the cost of your father's cunning," he said, voice tight. "And that is precisely why we must avoid another war." Cersei's eyes gleamed, a predator's look. "Then you will keep the secret, Lord Stark. For the good of the realm, you will remain silent. We both know Robert will never suspect while my father is here, watching me like a hawk. And you would be wise to do the same." Ned felt sick with himself, but what choice did he have? He had come to King's Landing to protect the king, to safeguard the realm, and to uncover the truth about Jon Arryn. But the truth threatened to bring destruction. Perhaps the best course was to wait until he could find a way to protect Robert and ensure a peaceful succession. He wanted to rail against the injustice, to declare that honor demanded the truth. But the memory of Tywin's cold gaze and Robert's precarious position stayed his tongue. Cersei seemed to sense his torment. She touched his arm lightly, an unsettling gesture of empathy. "You are not the first to learn the secret, Ned Stark. Jon Arryn did, and he died. If you reveal it, you might share his fate and bring about the realm's ruin. My father will not tolerate a whisper of scandal, not after all his efforts to build House Lannister to its current heights. If you truly care for the realm, keep your silence." He drew away from her touch, jaw tight. "You speak as though you are doing the realm a favor." She shrugged. "Sometimes a well-placed lie is kinder than a destructive truth." With that, she turned and vanished into the darkness of the Godswood, leaving Ned to wrestle with the weight of his honor versus the good of the realm. Days turned into weeks. The tourney commenced, knights from across the 7 kingdoms arriving to test their mettle. Sansa lit up at the pageantry. Arya found it all both fascinating and frivolous. Ned went through the motions, awarding the victor of each event with Robert at his side. Robert seemed cheerful, deep in his cups most of the time, but still breathing. No fatal boar hunts, no suspicious wineskins from Cersei. Tywin's presence loomed behind the scenes, ensuring that none dared make a move against the king. At the same time, Tywin orchestrated private talks with high lords. Ned heard rumors that Lord Tywin was planning an advantageous match for Myrcella with some powerful house in the Reach or the Stormlands to strengthen the crown's alliances. Even in the matter of Joffrey's betrothal to Sansa, Tywin inserted himself, ensuring certain contracts were drawn up carefully. Ned could see that for all the risk of scandal, Tywin was proceeding as if Joffrey's claim was utterly secure. Ned thought bitterly of the genealogies that proved otherwise. Then came a fateful day. Tyrion Lannister finally arrived in the city. Ned had never met him personally, but he had heard many stories. The dwarf had a cunning wit and sharp tongue, not unlike Tywin in strategic brilliance, though lacking his father's cold sense of decorum. Tyrion wasted no time immersing himself in the city's intrigues. On one occasion, Ned encountered Tyrion by happenstance in the library of the Red Keep, rummaging through old books. The dwarf greeted him with a broad, knowing smirk. "My Lord Hand," Tyrion said. "What a coincidence. I heard you've been reading up on lineages lately. Fascinating hobby, isn't it?" Ned's heart skipped a beat, but he kept his expression neutral. "Knowledge of the great houses is important in my position. Some lines are quite distinct." Tyrion cocked his head. "Indeed, some lines are quite surprising, too." His mismatched eyes seemed to dance with private amusement. "Curious that you'd be so interested in the Baratheon line, though. Or am I mistaken?" He walked along the shelves, fingers trailing across the spines of dusty tomes. Ned bristled. "If you have something to say, Lannister, say it plainly." Tyrion turned, regarding Ned with an unreadable gaze. "All I will say, my lord, is that if one digs too deeply, one might unearth secrets that are best left buried. My father is not a forgiving man. But if one were to, say, discreetly share certain revelations with the right people, ones who could protect you, perhaps an agreement could be reached. Purely hypothetical, of course." He gave a half-bow. "Forgive my ramblings. I'm new in town and easily bored." Ned watched him depart, heart hammering. Tyrion knew, or at least suspected, if he told Tywin. But would Tywin do anything so rash as to kill the hand of the king in plain sight? Possibly, if it protected the family's power. Yet Tyrion might also have his own angle. He was not known for blind loyalty to his father, nor for meekly submitting to Tywin's wishes. The dwarf might see this as leverage. The game had grown more dangerous by the day. Still, the weeks wore on, and King Robert remained alive, though ever more reckless. On more than one occasion, Ned attempted to counsel him, urging him to limit his drinking, to be more watchful. Robert brushed aside his concerns. "Stop mothering me, Ned," he would say. "I survived a war. I'll survive a few casks of wine. The boars and stags of the Kingswood have more to fear from me than I from them." Ned often exchanged worried glances with Ser Barristan, but neither could truly control the king. Yet the one who might have, Cersei, seemed subdued by her father's presence. If Robert had any near-death accidents, Tywin would see through it at once, and Cersei would face consequences she likely wished to avoid. As time stretched on, Ned feared a different possibility. Perhaps Tywin planned to bide his time until Robert's appetites or some carefully engineered accident ended the king's life naturally. Then Joffrey would ascend, unchallenged, with Tywin as the true power behind the throne. Would that be any better than a direct poisoning? Hard to say. The realm would still be led by a false heir, one with Tywin's shadow looming over him. Where would that leave the Starks or the North? The tension reached a boiling point when an ugly rumor spread. A messenger from Casterly Rock had arrived with urgent news that might concern the king. Ned never learned the exact nature of the news, but he heard Tywin demanded an immediate private audience with Robert. Later, the king emerged from that audience pale and furious, though the details were not disclosed. That night, Robert drank enough wine to fell an ox, yet he did not die. He merely staggered to his bedchamber with the help of a guard, cursing Tywin under his breath. Cersei took a measured approach, staying close to her father. Whenever Ned saw them together, they spoke in hushed tones. Jaime hovered in the background, arms folded, watching any who came near. Tyrion, for his part, kept his own counsel, but Ned suspected the dwarf was collecting secrets the way a magpie collects shiny trinkets. Eventually, the first major cracks in the facade emerged not from a murder plot, but from Robert's mounting debts. The crown's creditors began pressing for payment. When Ned tried to reason with Robert, the king bellowed that he was not some merchant's whore to be bullied by debts. Tywin stepped in, calm as ever, offering to pay off the most pressing debts if certain conditions were met. Ned never learned all the details of that arrangement, but it was rumored that Tywin secured exclusive rights to certain gold mines along the border between the Westerlands and the Reach. The noose of Lannister gold tightened around the crown's neck. Robert, perhaps feeling cornered, sank deeper into his wine.